I could
Peter,
just,
thank you.
if I could just ask about the call reviews, because it was a major point raised by the staff side. I see that if I read it, it's on page 7 of 15. That we've got a generic arrangement and a clinical arrangement. And what I just didn't quite understand, and perhaps there's a chance to clarify this, how the thing as a whole is brought together, because that was one of the key points made. Could it be brought together if you defined it in those two sort of separate streams? How is it brought together, and is that satisfactory on the point made by Nick about quality? Is that, how is that working?
Sure. Chair now, or
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Board members will recall that we have a very robust and effective call review tool currently, and the generic call review tool has been taken from the learning, from that specific call review. So we have a generic call review tool that allows us to look at the generic aspects of every type of a call, and then we have subsequently developed specific call review tools to enable health information, dental and the clinical elements of all calls to be looked at by a clinician. So a team leader will be able to complete the generic element. Anybody can complete the generic element of the call review tool based on our existing call review tool, but we have specifically developed a suite of separate, but based on the call review that we currently do, tools that will enable us to check the quality, integrity and safety of the clinical aspects of the call, and from dental and health information perspective too.
Excuse me.
How does it all, that was the main point.
How does it come
Pulling it
together?
together, really.
So in terms of how a call is reviewed, so that we still have the same approach where you will have peer review, supervisory review and random review. So a call will be able to, sorry?
Himself.
Yeah, peer and self.
Oh, yeah.
Peer and self, supervisory and random.
Right.
And you will be able to pull a call which will start with the generic element, and then the team leader will do, and then the clinical element will be looked at by the clinical lead, or indeed the central team that we've got to review random calls.
And will the member of staff get holistic feedback?
Yes.
How that works?
On the start, from the team manager themselves, from the start of the call to the end of the call, the call will be reviewed, and the team manager gives the individual feedback.
Louisa, was your question related to that?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be.
Yeah, because this is one of the things that concerns me the most. I mean, as you say, staff raised it a lot, and I just feel, so I feel a bit concerned about this. So. It would be nice, I suppose, to have seen what the generic tool might look like, and also to get a sense of how how it's been how the process has been validated, perhaps. And then I'm still not sure, and you probably have explained. I'm sorry if I don't get it. What triggers the generic to a clinical review? Who does that process of triggering it? Because that's what I'm just not sure about.
So if the individual, if there isn't a trigger, it is that the clinical element is literally reviewed by a clinician, and that clinician will either be the clinical lead, practice development coach, or one of the central nurses that we've got reviewing the calls. So the clinical element of a call will be reviewed by a clinician, and the generic element of the call will be reviewed by a team leader, or it can be a non-clinician of any.
Is there a distinction, Helen, between routine and by exception?
It depends what you mean by routine. So we'll still go through the 1% audit, so that we will have, and you'll do an element of your own review. So as a member of staff, you'll do an element of your own review. Your supervisor will do an element of review, and you will have some of your calls randomly reviewed, and that makes up the totality of the call review percentage that we'll do as an organisation. And on top of that, there is the reviews that will be dictated because of a serious adverse incident or complaint, or some health professional feedback that showed that we've potentially done something wrong, and we recall the recording of a call, and we'll review it in that way. So that's separate to routine call review.
Okay, so sorry about this. So in the random call review, somebody will look at the generic bit, but then somebody else, a clinician will always review. Put it through a sort of clinical.
The clinician will always review, in the system that we're proposing, the clinician will always review the clinical elements of the call.
Okay, so the way that course review, just went past me again, you've got the random, you've got the sort of the proportion that are done sort of, you know, randomly.
Yeah.
You've got ones that somebody will say, well, I wasn't happy with how this call went.
Yes.
Any other way of...
And the supervisor, so the supervisor being either clinical lead, or the team manager might also say, could you have a look at this call to a clinical lead? So the clinical lead themselves will pick up from their particular team a number of call reviews, and the team leader is still in a position, the team manager is still in a position to say that, could you please have a look at this call from this individual?
So the only, sorry, so the only risk would be if a team manager who wasn't wasn't a clinician, is there any risk they could miss a call that had a clinical component in it and they miss it?
Not really, because the clinician, there's always going to be a clinician reviewing the clinical elements of any call review that takes place. Does that?
I think so, yeah.
You have one call review,
what can I do
and there are
to-
elements within the call review.
Yeah.
Part of it is done by the team leader, part of it is done by a clinician, but it's one call review record, as I understand it. And we've discussed it quite a lot at the Clinical Governance Committee as well, because if you look at the KPI, we are not meeting our 1% call review targets. And we've been assured as a committee that these changes will enable us to hit the 1% KPI.
Thank you. Sorry I've taken so much time on that.
Okay, good. Fine. So we've addressed the issue of call reviews. Is there anything else that was bothering anyone
I had
about
some questions
Peter?
about the process, but that's different to
The process of the consultation or the process
of the implementation.
of implementation. Okay, that's fine. Nick, did you want
It's
to
a sort
make
of
a comment?
half question or comment. We have attempted to pitch the number of clinical leads who we require to provide what I call moment-by-moment support for call handling, rather unbecomingly called the 08 Hunt Group, but it is jargon, but that's what it means, having an experienced nurse on the end of the phone. And I'm quite conscious that that's a feature of the number of calls that we get, and also the extent of questions that there are. And we will need to keep that under review. And I would hate to think that we go back into the same sort of review mode as we've been in the last 3 months in order to respond to changes.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. And equally, what we're setting here are the number of team managers by saying we believe that one team manager will manage about 20 staff. So I think in terms of if you were sitting as a team leader or clinical team leader, dental team leader, you would be worrying about these numbers. And they are at the heart of this document. I'm just trying to point out that we do run a dynamic service, and these numbers will change, as they say, both up and down over the course of time. And I don't want the principles that we're adopting here to be clouded simply by the numbers.
That came across nice and clear.
I did feel that the way in which the support point you made earlier to staff, because we heard the dental nurses saying they felt that perhaps they weren't being given sufficient support over time, and you've now given that support, I believe, to help them with their dilemmas, as it were. But of course, over time, as people become more experienced and this system matures, things will move on again. So
Yes.
we've got to accept that.
Roger, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's very important that we build in a review of these changes after, say, 6 months. I mean, built into Agenda for Change is a review of the job descriptions, for example. That is an automatic thing that happens, so that you set you evaluate the jobs here at a certain band, and then built into the Agenda for Change process is a review of that job description after 6 months. So it's important we do that.
Okay, fine. I'm wondering whether there are any other questions at this point. Because Peter, you had a question about implementation. Before we do that, I mean, as we've said repeatedly, we believe that staff have had lots of opportunity to have their voices heard in this process.
and I think we particularly want to thank the staff and their representatives for really fully engaging, because any of these big changes, the recommendations are improved by being thoroughly gone over by the staff who will be affected, and having the experience that they have and the knowledge of the practicalities and their wisdom and input into the process by challenging it. So I think we have a great debt of gratitude to the staff who've really had it fully come back to us and looked at it carefully and critiqued the proposals and come back to us with alternatives and challenges. That being said, I don't know if there's anybody who wants to, on the staff side, sort of say anything very brief at this stage as we reach the denouement of the process. James, did you want to?
Yeah, I think obviously I won't go over the issues of the report, so now you've seen the
You have to speak up.
Could you speak up a little? Maybe you could stand up.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Sorry, it's me going deaf.
I think the issue now, obviously the final management paper's out. I think some of the anxiety maybe has gone of what is the final outcome from a management point of view of the consultation. I think the anxiety now for staff is which roles will they get, and then the overall structure. So what is about the roles, responsibilities, the processes, the systems, will all these be in place that actually the affected staff will be able to do the roles, achieve them, get satisfaction from them, support the frontline staff. I think that's the anxieties from the frontline staff. So I guess from a staff side point of view, moving forward specifically, it's about obviously the first thing is the recruitment process, making sure everyone's it's fair, transparent, everyone has an opportunity to go for the jobs that they want, but no one's displaced. Then I think moving on, it's obviously about the implementation, the proper implementation group set up with an ongoing review, because I think there are a lot of the concern of a lot of staff is about the systems and the processes and how will this work.
Yeah.
That's what they want to do. So I think those are things to really bear in mind.
Thank you, James. That's great. I mean, that takes us neatly into Peter's point. And I must say, one of the issues that I've been most interested in understanding and making sure that we address is to be absolutely clear that our systems evolve to support these new ways of working, and that we're not asking staff to do new jobs in different ways with a system that seems to be working against them or doesn't support them in the way that we're now asking them to work. So that's an implementation issue.
It is.
Peter, you have an implementation issue,
well,
and then perhaps we can...
Certainly part of it. We heard earlier about the rostering project and capacity issues and perhaps the disjointedness of losing people and over the period of the implementation. I'd like to ask for some assurances around that process. Secondly, I note that there's this 4-week trial period. I just wanted to understand how that would work. It comes with the assumption, I assume, that most people won't say I'm not satisfied with it. But it's just a query that I've got about it, because it could actually cause quite a bit of difficulty for the management of the system if it broke down in any way. Also, I was just seeing it build up to the winter peaks, and I was just wondering how, if at all, there should be some safeguards in that respect, so that people just understand it won't massively influence or cause a problem there. We just talked about the development underpinning, the way in which staff will have this underpinned to support them, your word. Just what it is that would be there for them, what support there is.